Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The first item on our meetings is to approve the meetings from March 22nd and April 5th. I make a motion for approval. Motion is made, second by Dave, all in favor? Next, I'm introduce the Oakland's new town police officer, Chief Tracy.
Okay, it is my pleasure tonight to introduce Tiffany Warren. She's our latest and newest member of the police department, which brings us up to full staff. Believe it or not. One of the few agencies in the area to have full staff. We're very happy to have her. She comes to us from Skowhegan PD, where she was working for 7 years. That's almost 7 years. So she's a seasoned officer and she is ready to go, other than waiting for her regular uniforms, which aren't in yet. So she's wearing the OD green, I guess you'd call it. So
Are you a Skowhegan native?
I grew up in Smithfield, but I graduated from Messalonski.
With you, Bob.
We won't hold it again.
No other further questions? Tiffany, thank you. Welcome. Please feel free to call us if we give it out.
Thank you.
Adding a new resource officer to the schools, Mr. Carl Gartley and Chief Mike Tracy.
yeah, go ahead. All right, it's yeah.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here. I always enjoy coming down and talking to you folks tonight. My board last week did authorize me to move forward and speak to you folks about getting a new resource officer. We currently have two. They spend the majority of their times right here in Oakland, at the high school and the middle school. We try to get them out to buildings as much as we can. But there has been more and more of a request to have officers out in the buildings around the district. Their roles are vast. It's resource officer, it's deterrent, it's social worker, it's a lot of, they wear a lot of hats. I see it as an incredible asset to our district. I believe in, most of you know me, I'm a strong advocate of education, but a big part of that is interventions, whether it be in mathematics and literacy or whatever. That's how we have made such progress. We study data, we look at what kids need, and we move forward. I believe in that for behavior too. And these resource officers are just huge asset when it comes to our truancy issues, any bullying issues. Unfortunately, we have a lot of parent issues at the elementary school nowadays. There's a lot of trauma that our kids are going through. So it is just something we really, really want to have in our district. Is that third officer. They would spend that we'd be able to keep officer presence at more than the Belgrade, Sydney, China schools, other than just being in very Oakland. The board has authorized me to pay for it. Of course, it's your employee. You invoice us. The current two officers, you invoice us for about 75%, I believe, is what Ella invoices the district for of their time. The rest of the time is spent in the town of Oakland. Third officer will spend similar time, most of the school year in the school, and then spend some time with the town in the vacation weeks. But we're going to pay for 100% of the time. That way it doesn't, no impact, there'll be no impact to taxpayers. We have a grant for any startup costs that you would incur, as far as, vest, handcuffs, whatever it need. I'd have to look into how it goes, whether we can buy a weapon. I don't know if I'd be able to do that, but I'd have to look at the grant, but it's just something we believe deeply in. I'm extremely proud of the relationship we have with the town, with the officers. I don't know many districts that have as close working relationship with the local PD and resource officers as our SUAT. So it's not our employees, so I need your blessing. I'm not in a rush. I'd like to do it for the start of the year, but I also know hiring new officers is a challenge. Welcome, by the way. I hope that I get to meet you more. But I don't want to pull somebody from what you guys need. So if it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 months for you to hire the right officer, then we'll wait. But my goal is to have a third officer as soon as next year. If we can do it at the start of the year, great. If not, we'll wait until you're ready. But that is my request to you.
I don't have a lot to add. I think I certainly agree with everything that Carl has said. I think everybody in the room knows how important the school relationship is, school resource officer and police department relationship is to me. I was the original school resource officer in the district 20-something years ago. So it's very important to me, and I think we are the exception more than the rule when you look at, what we have for a relationship, when you look at other districts. My officers, any one of them can walk into any one of the buildings in the district and they're welcomed. I mean, there's no, oh my God, what are they doing here? They're happy to see us. And it's a great deterrent, and I just think that it's a wonderful program. If we can put a third officer out there, considering the number of buildings that we have in the district, I think we're ahead of the game, so.
Questions, Dana? Do you have any officers on your force now that you think would be interested in this job?
I have a couple of officers on the force that have already told me that they would be interested in that. But I mean, as Carl and I have talked, and I certainly am not going to take away from my patrol force, to put somebody in the school until we can hire somebody for a replacement.
But they will have an opportunity to do this.
They will have an
somebody.
Absolutely.
Just to add to that, the relationship that town of Oakland has with our 218 is, it just can't get any better. We work well together, and if Carl needs something, he comes down and sees me and vice versa. So I certainly think that his argument holds a lot of water, and I think that I would certainly support that.
I would also add that, because we're on the school board as well, when I was there for the discussion, none of the three of us from Oakland were the ones that brought this up. But when it was brought up and the discussions that were had around the boardroom, as Carl will tell you, were overwhelmingly supportive. It was unanimous.
John Bowman?
What's the long range? 5 year down the road, is funding consistently gonna be up there, or are we gonna come to a period where we might have to change the way it's funded?
As far as school funding goes, our population has stabilized. We've ticked up we went through a period of dropping down. We ticked up in the last few years. I see it going flat for the next, decade or so. Funding wise, that's always an interesting one. I can tell you my guesses, but as you know, Donna, that's, I don't see any issues with this position being very, very much sought after in the district. I don't see that changing in anywhere near in the near future. I also see it as if I don't do this, I would be looking for other ways to meet these kids' needs. So I don't see it as it is an add. It is an add to the budget. I was able to do it. We had some cuts last week because fuel bids came in real well, so I was able to do it with the numbers that I had given Ella originally. But I don't see this as something that if we get rid of this, it would be a cut. I would have to add more social worker or pull in some other safety features, somehow safety features. This is something I desperately want.
So the plan would be that 5 years from now, you'll still be paying full boat of this person in town.
Yeah, and we're lucky because every morning I see Rick or Mike, Chief Tracy or Deputy Chief Stepper, in front of the schools at in Williams and going into the schools. They're there all the time. I consider this still the best deal in town for us. I think paying for a full resource officer, the school district is still getting the better at the end of the deal.
You have a plan for what they'll do in the summer?
Yeah, we have some summer student stuff I would like them to make attendance to, but my plan is to allow them to be utilized by Oakland, the town of Oakland, the majority of the time. With some exception, Oak Fest, they would, I'd want them in Oakland. I don't have a ton of needs during the summer, a few things. But when I ask for those things now, I get them. So even though they're technically not our officers during the summer, because we don't pay for them, but I see this as, that's probably the carrot for Oakland is, summer vacations of officers during the summer, you'll have an extra officer to fill those. And but again, I think during the year, we're getting a great deal because the whole Oakland police force is unbelievably responsive anytime I need anything. We have a threat as an officer at every building and parents just rave about it.
There's also a lot of training that happens during the summertime for school resource officers in particular, because that's an opportune time for them to attend. So they're involved in that quite a bit too.
Hey, Goda?
So I fully support the concept. My only question is, and it comes up every budget, what about a vehicle?
We have 2 vehicles now that are assigned to school resource officers. They'll be sharing those vehicles. If there's a day that they need an extra one, then they can take the spare. So we're not going to be adding a vehicle to the fleet day for that.
Yeah, guys, we know the discussion
I
goes around everything, and you know that's
where you're coming from.
I know that's gonna come up.
Yeah.
And I will actively work on grants if there's anything I can do to help with that.
Bob?
Thank you. I don't always dress like this, but today I had the good fortune, I just came, from the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee that I serve on, and I guess, and one of two committees that I serve on. And we've had lots of discussions, as you can imagine, about school safety, and every time there's trouble anywhere in the country, everybody worries about it, talks about it. I'm delighted to see the third SRO, because although it's just one piece of the puzzle, I think it's a huge piece of the puzzle. For more than just the safety that an officer provides, but the acquaintances that the officer makes with the children in school. Because lots of times on the news, the kids who watch the news, or social media, I think get a warped perception of what police officers are like, and having friendly, police officers in schools for any age kid is, I think, the number one most important thing to have in a school for safety. And you would be amazed at the number of people in Augusta who don't want any part of cops. They don't want them in the school, they don't want them having guns, they don't want them parked outside the school because they think it scares the children. And I think just the opposite. So I think the combination of the town manager and police chief that have made this work, and the superintendent of school, I think it's terrific. I support it completely.
Thank you.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
we're looking at purchasing a new vehicle this year, no?
Now, what we're doing this year, as part of our budget process was we're gonna be paying off the leases on the 2 electric cars. Rather than purchasing another vehicle.
So maybe next year we could take and keep another one instead of trading in for $1,500,
That would be an option.
just thinking out of the box, you know,
Yep.
then we could have, I like seeing a police car at the schools.
Yep.
If that itself is a deterrent, even if they don't think that, you know, and I said it 2 years ago when we kept the other one.
Yeah.
Keep the car, park it, I don't care if there's only one SRO on. At least there's a cruisers at the school and they think there's another one there, so.
Point well
This
taken.
SRO will be traveling between China, Belgrade, Sydney also.
Yes,
So if it comes down to the point of it, or later on, then if someone has to pay for it, we can divide it between 5 towns instead of just one.
well, the school budget or the school department is paying for it anyway, so
I
it
know
will
that,
be,
but I'm just saying, in the future,
Compliments of
if
capital.
something was to come about,
yes,
you know, all great intentions of paving, great pavement, but sometimes it'll crack and fall.
Yeah,
So
That is true.
that's just, you know what I'm saying, it'd be easier. I think it's a tremendous idea, I'm all in. You know,
thank you.
I just want to add that this is going to be a process. It's too late to get this into our budget process for May 2nd, because the deadline is April 15th. Reports have been printed, everything has been changed. So what we're going to do is during the town meeting, I'm going to mention that we're going to be having a second town meeting, a special town meeting, so that we can bring this together. I do have to bring back the budget advisory committee so that we can brief them on the situation so that they can go and get a vote on it too. That's based on our charter. So we'll have another town meeting probably sometime in June. It's a short one. Discuss this and get it passed.
I agree with Chairman here. I think that's a good move to put on another SRO. I have grandchildren in Belgrade School now, so I think you should have one that goes down there. But I think you're only halfway there without a cruiser sitting out front. I mean, that's like putting up a billboard, hey, stupid, there's a cop in here with a gun, you know, so I think, you know, it really is important to work on that.
Absolutely.
I will see what I can do.
we all did.
Yeah, I'd make a motion, we proceed to, get a new officer in so they can have an SRO.
Motion's
As
been
soon as
made,
you find out if one of ours wants it.
motion's made second by Dave, all in favor. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very
I really
much.
Appreciate it.
Next item up, chief, that's another presentation.
Yeah. Pass out some things if I may.
Go travel.
I know. I know. There's a lot of boards and stuff there. This is, as you'll see, that if you recall during the budget and advisory committee meetings. There were questions that they had that they forwarded. I'll get one of these in. Sure. That they forwarded to me and then I answered, and I think you got copies of these then, but. Because you also submitted some questions, I kept going. So I don't know when to stop. I kept going and answered your questions in the final pages as well. I did that in writing, but I figured I would hand it to you so for reference, but we could also take the time to discuss it. If you would like to do that. I'm certainly open to any questions or any further discussion as we go through these. I'll go through these very quickly, so if you have any questions outside of this, or you can use this, as I said, for reference after the fact. So I won't start with all the questions in the front. I'll just start with your questions that were sent to me. That were town council specific. And the first one was, other than staffing, what challenges does the department and the town face regarding the police department? And I know you said other than staffing in the very beginning, and of course, the first thing I wrote is recruitment and retention, which is staffing. But I honestly believe that that's the greatest challenge that we have, and that's the greatest challenge we face in Oakland. It's the greatest challenge the state and nationally and everywhere else. It's the greatest challenge in police work right now is not only recruiting people, but retaining. Retention is just important. So I think that's one of the greatest challenges we have. Especially when you look at the national narrative now and the police reform movements and all those things that are out there now. As Bob stated, there are a lot of people out there that believe police officers should be not seen or heard. I tend to disagree with that. But that's our greatest problem, I think. And then the next paragraph, you'll see I talked about the mental health crisis, and that is certainly a big problem in our communities, in our state, in our nation. And it's something that we have to deal with every day. I mean, I would say 90% easily of our calls that we deal with every day are mental health related. Now, they may be drug related, they may have other issues embedded in them, but I think when you dig down to the root of the problem, that you're going to be talking about a mental health issue. That is the most prevalent in the things we deal with day to day. And because of that, it makes the calls that we deal with day to day a lot more dangerous than they were in the past. Back when I first started, I mean, you were dealing, you might go out and have to deal with a drunk or deal with somebody that's pissed off about something or have a domestic or something. But now when you sprinkle on top of that the mental health problems that people are suffering today, I think it makes it a lot more dangerous for our officers, and it requires a lot more training. And one of the things that is nationally and in the state starting to happen a lot more now is what they call a co-response model, which is involving mental health responders who are actually becoming part of the police department and actually responding with police officers. Because let's face it, I mean, police officers are very minimally trained in mental health response. I mean, it's a big part of our academy, but our academy doesn't teach you everything until you get out on the road. I can tell you that. We're minimally trained in that. So to have somebody co-responding with us to some of these calls that are mental health calls in particular, I think it makes it a lot safer to have somebody there that's trained in how to deal with that and can help deal with that side of the issue. And then we can solve the rest of the problems from there. So that's a pretty important thing. The next thing I talked about was the drug problem that persists in our world. That's not going to change anytime soon. It's continuing. And again, you sprinkle the mental health problems on top of drug problems and alcohol problems. And again, it's calling for a messy situation that we're dealing with. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort in our response times. So, and then the next thing that I put in there was the next 3 to 5 years. And I think Dave actually brought this up during the budget and advisory committee meetings. Next 3 to 5 years, we're going to be presented with updating our current software system, our IMC system. It's going to cost some money. Don't know what that cost is as of right now. We're still looking into that, but that's another issue that we are going to be dealing with in they're failing in future, that's gonna cost money. If you have any other questions on that, I'd be happy to answer it, or we'll go to number 2. The next one is, what is one goal that we should consider for enhancing the police department? And what I talked about there really is twofold. One is training. I mentioned that before. I think training is very important. We need to keep our officers trained in the modern technologies and the modern equipment, and just we need to maintain a competent police force. We have to know those modern systems, and we have to engage with them. The second thing I would talk about was, we talked about this before as well, is the accreditation process that we're involved in right now. That's continuing. I think that's very important because, as we discussed in those sessions, the accreditation brings us to the highest standard of professionalism across the board for everybody. I think it's very important. So we're continuing with that, and that's another thing that I think is important for us. The third thing, your third question you had is, do we have any, and by the way, the deputy chief, feel free to jump in on this anytime, because I talk fast and a lot of times don't stop talking here, allow people to ask questions. 3, do we have any statistical information that summarizes positive and negative challenges for the town? There are always statistics out there. I mean, you can grab statistics from any number of different places and get all kinds of information, some good, some bad. But I think the bottom line is that the Oakland Police Department is, I think we're pretty closely in line with other municipalities our size, or other municipalities in the state, or county law enforcement, or whatever. I think that we're running pretty even with them as far as what we have for overdose deaths, domestic violence calls, sex cases, the whole gambit. I mean, we have everything that everybody else has that we're dealing with. So the problem, the difficulty here is, or the question that I have is, are we gaining ground or losing ground? And I think many of the programs that we have in place, the accreditation thing we just talked about, our training and all those things that we are really striving toward, is going to bring us to where we need to be. So, and then number 4 was print off traffic stops over the past 5 years, pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID. And so I've done that. I gave you what they were. 2018, we had 1,952 traffic stops. That was a pretty normal year for us, as years went back then. 2019, we had 1,645, so we had like 300 fewer. Again, generally a normal year. The start of the COVID-19 pandemic occurred towards the very end of that year. In 2020, that was anything but a normal year. We had 406 traffic stops. Now, that was when the COVID pandemic was in pretty much full swing. Vehicle registration, inspection requirements, a lot of traffic laws were put on hold by the legislature, by the government. And human contact, including traffic stops, was kept to a minimum to avoid physical contact, frankly. So that the numbers were down quite a bit. Then 2021, even more so, 257 traffic stops. COVID protocols were still primarily in effect. And plus, we were down 2 officers, plus we had an officer that was deployed for 3 months. So we were, running on a shoestring, pretty much, and that devastated our patrol force, generally speaking. 2022, we were back to 450 traffic stops, and though the protocols were generally lifted then, we were still experiencing the personnel loss that makes it very difficult for officers to be out doing their traffic things, because they're just trying to keep their heads above water, investigating the calls that they have, and doing all the paperwork and the follow-up and all those kinds of things that they have to do when you are, working twice as many shifts and, working by yourself all the time. So we're kind of still feeling the effects of that today. I think you would find, if you looked at it, and I was meant to have her print out where we are in 2023. But I can tell you that the numbers in 2023 are going to be back, hopefully, to the post-COVID normal times. I think probably today you would have seen I don't know, you probably had 5 or 6 traffic stops on the day shift. I know a couple days ago, they had 50 on the day shift. So, I mean, the numbers are certainly rising back to where they should be. As far as I'm concerned personally, and all the guys know this on the department, all my guys and gals, actually, I noticed on the department that, traffic enforcement is where the rubber meets the road, in my eyes. Police department gets more done on on enforcing traffic laws, than they do by any other means. I mean, you make a lot more contacts with people. And there's a lot that happens because the traffic stop can be made, and there's a lot of the criminal cases. That happen as a result of a traffic stop on the road, you know, drug cases, theft cases, you know, this. And Dave can say the same thing. I mean, we need a lot of that, so it's very important to me. But so again, you know, a lot of the factors that have affected the numbers in the last couple of years were our workfare, force shortages, COVID related issues. Another big thing, and Dave can attest to this, the loss of Bureau Highway Safety grants. So the grants are still out there. We used to use part-time officers to fill those details. And they would do a lot of that, and that would attest or account for a lot of the traffic stops that happened out there. We got a lot of traffic stops on grants. But the federal government, in their wisdom, decided to change the rules, and they no longer allowed part-time officers to work those details. And that radically reduced the number of traffic stops each year, because we were just no longer able to do those details because the part-time or the full-timers were already overwhelmed on the hours that they were working, and it was just at their overtime rate. So I mean, just working the shifts, they were making that overtime. They didn't have to run through special details on top of that. So let me see, the officers are much busier today than the past year than that. I mean, we talked about that with all the mental health calls and all those things, the drug calls that are going on today. It's a different world. I mean, I don't think if I went out on patrol again today, I wouldn't recognize it as compared to what it was back when I started. It's a lot more dangerous. The calls are very different. The mentalities are a lot different than they used to be. It's a different world out there. And I really, you know, have my hats are off to the officers and the job they do every day. And the other thing is, frankly, our Oakland Police Department has a much smaller patrol force than all of the other area departments. We have 10 officers full-time, including myself, and 4 of those are patrol officers who are supervisors, patrol supervisors. But we have 2 SROs that are in our ranks, hopefully about to be 3. So really, we don't have the patrol force numbers that other departments have. You know, a lot of departments, I think Winslow has 12 full-time officers. They only have 1 that's an SRO. So their patrol force, they have 2 officers on a lot of the time, where we don't. So that really knocks down the numbers of traffic stops we have as well. So those are kind of the issues that I wrote down in answer to the questions that you had. And I'm certainly open to any other questions or any other discussions you want to have about anything across the board. And I appreciate the opportunity. Go on.
There are a bunch of things that are either affecting us now or will be soon, and I'm sure you have thoughts, but could you sort of update us on the 911 issue and who's gonna be the call center and how we're gonna deal with losing Somerset, and what's gonna maybe maybe the legislature could put some pressure on somebody, if there's anybody who's got some connections with them.
I think what pretty much is happening right now, Don, and Ella can probably answer this better than I can, with the PSAP thing, which is the public safety answering point, which is where the 911 calls go to, which is different than dispatch. But our PSAP has been Somerset, and for their own reasons, budgeting reasons, workforce, manpower reasons, or whatever, they are no longer able to do that. And I think that Waterville is very close to now being able to pick up that slack. So I think really our only real option, economically and frankly, what makes sense, our only real option is to go with Waterville if their plan comes to fruition, which it looks like it's going to. And you certainly
That
add
makes the
anything.
logical sense. I mean, Waterville does understand,
really does.
and in ways it made no sense to me that 911 service for Somerset. They're proposing a cost of $2.50 per capita.
How much was it? How much?
$450.
$450 a capita, $28,165. The budget for Somerset was $10,100. We doubled that for a budget, so it's gonna be almost 3 times what we were paying. So it's gonna have another $8,000 on our budget.
Frankly, the deal that we had in Somerset was exceptional. I mean, nobody else around had a deal like that, and I think that they, in the end, realized that perhaps their deal was a little too good for them to survive economically or again with the workforce that they have available to them, so.
Second issue, how about the court system? How backlogged are the courts and how does that affect you guys?
I think you can probably answer
Yeah,
that.
I think they've caught up. It's way better than it was, immediately post-COVID. It's affected us in the respect that they're not holding anybody. Everybody's out on multiple sets of bails. So we're dealing with the same people over and over where it used to be. They went to jail, they stayed in jail. Now they're back out for multiple sets of bail conditions. That makes it hard. We're dealing with some fairly violent people over and over again. Other than that, that's probably the biggest effect it's had. I think they've worked through the backlog and the dockets, but that's the big thing.
Bob, nothing?
I was just gonna say about the PSAPs. I think at one point, several years ago, there were a large number of PSAPs.
There were.
And they passed a law that there could only be 16 or 18 or some number like that. And so when Somerset decided not to do part of Kennebec, to look for a new PSAP, they actually had to change the law. I don't know why they would put something like that in the law, but they did, and then either the law or the rules needed to be changed to allow for one more PSAP.
Yes,
But I've heard that Waterville is all but a done deal.
Yeah.
So that's good news and bad news at the same. Good news that we got somebody, bad news that we lost the sweetheart deal that we probably had.
and there is one advantage, however, and that's in logical sense, like Ella said. When you called 911, it was being answered by the PSAP, which was in Somerset County. Information was gathered there, and then the call was relayed to Waterville to dispatch. So I mean, there was that disconnect, if you will, between those two spots, and it was a time-consuming thing and a confusing thing for both sides of the issue. So now dispatch has to almost pretty much ask the same questions to get the same information. So, in a true emergency, which 911 is designed for, that could be problematic. So now if it goes to Waterville, it's going to be one person, one dispatcher answering as a 911 dispatcher. But they'll also be dispatching the call to the unit on the road to respond. So I think it's going to be a lot more efficient.
I got just two more things. One was about traffic stops and the fact that a lot of people, particularly on social media, are concerned that everybody's going 80 miles an hour past their house.
Yeah.
That's sort of true, maybe sometimes, but the more traffic stops you have, and if that, and the pictures of people pulled over with the blue lights going on social media does wonders for PR, I think, for most people.
Agree.
And I'll be careful coming down Summer Street. The other thing was that, the other thing is, are your officers all trained to use Narcan?
Yes.
Doses, they
Yes.
all are.
They are.
And they're not, is that done at the academy now, do you know?
When we got Narcan, we actually had a lady from Maine General come to our training.
Further questions?
So, do you have it on all the cruises now? Narcan's available?
Yes, it's actually made available to us through the Attorney General's office at no cost. And it has been for a few years now, so.
The reason I ask is somebody put in a bill in the legislature to require police officers to have on their person Narcan. And I think we beat that back because it would have included people working undercover, everybody would.
Right.
And so they now kind of think you ought to have one close by. And the other thing was if you were out on a call and you have one in your cruiser and you use it, then what do? Do you have to go back to the station, another one before you go out and cruise around anymore? And so, I think we beat that back, but there's a lot of A lot of crazy bills.
Like it. Oh, yeah. You're gonna have up to 2,500 in the end. what I hear.
Yeah, they
I have
don't.
one other question for the chief. I know you've just got the two electrics you're paying for this year, but I assume we'll be after another cruiser, certainly for next year.
We will.
When you're ready for that, would you give us some information about the maintenance, gas mileage, et cetera, of this Dodge that we bought with the V8 compared to the Explorers with the smaller engine and all that, when the time comes? I don't need it now, but.
I can tell you this, I mean, I can't tell you a lot about gas mileage and those kinds of things, because that's not, my brain's not wired that way, but Mike Sayer is, he can come tell you all that stuff. But I can tell you this, that we are spending a lot of money right now. From our maintenance account on these cars, and they're all the Fords. Which I hate to say, because I really like the Fords, they love the Dodge, but we're having zero problems with the Dodge. And we're having numerous problems with the Ford. Our newest Ford is our biggest problem, but I think it's.
I think that's the information we need come budget time.
Yes.
If we're gonna be comparing these cars.
Yeah.
How they're working out, the fuel usage and repair usage and things like that.
Yeah.
Other questions? Chief, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Next up is the mayor of Sydney, Mr. Boyd. Boyd, the presentation of a part-time seasonal worker for his environmental service department.
Okay, so, yeah, what we're here to look at this year, couple of years, when I first started, we had a summer help, kind of doing maintenance stuff and kind of working with me. We were doing 2015, I think we did, try to inspect some pumps, which we were only able to get 25% of the people on board on that, but we had a summer person happy with that. This coming year, we're gonna have quite a bit of construction activity going on in Oakland. We've got the paving job on KMD, which we've got a number of manholes where had to raise on that, coming all the way down through the intersection here, so we'll be busy dealing with that amongst our schedules. The design of Lower Oak Street, Railroad Street, and a number of, I think there's 12 other manholes, Stockdale and Oak Street replacing. That job is designed, so I just gotta get finalize the specifications, and then that'll be on the street. That's for that was with the ARPA money you both said, provided to do that sewer work, so that design is ready to go. I just gotta do my final review on it. And then hopefully, next week or the week after, that'll be on the street. So when I do any type of construction project, you gotta have somebody on there. Not that people do things incorrectly, but it's just there's somebody's there to help the contractor answer questions. So this person that I'm looking at, either a summer engineering student or any candidate that is a little bit familiar with construction. I want eyes there, so if I'm gonna jump somewhere else, they can be camped out there watching the construction going on, making sure compaction, that's a big thing that sometimes gets kind of overlooked, and then the taxpayers pay the brunt of that down the road when the trench settles, so. So that'll be a big part of what they do. We've also got the closed landfill work that we're doing, kind of phase one of that work on the south side of the landfill, where we've had some moving materials or what have you. We've got to got some standing water because of slopes down there that obviously on a landfill, standing water, you don't really want that percolating down to the clay layer. Even though it takes a while, so we need to regrade that. We've been working with DEP, come up with a plan to do that. Basically, we'll be removing the loam surface, and we're hoping that DEP will allow us to bring in clay, not the clay designed for the landfill, but a cap that may be a little less stringent, so we can get clay for next to nothing, as long as it doesn't have to be too many difficult standards. So we'll peel back the loam, regrade that, put it back in so we can shed water off the landfill to prevent potential, issues with the landfill and everything underneath there. So that's another part we'll have, and I would expect, Public Works can be doing that work, but will be either myself or whoever I bring on board, we'll be working with them, checking grades, setting grades, and working with probably Jeff. My guess would be directly in one of the first Public Works on that. So we've got that. We've got the ponds down below the transfer station site. on the west side of the road, on the McGraw side of the road, we're gonna replace that outlet structure on one of the constructed ponds. We've ordered it, it's been sitting up there, so that'll happen this summer as well. We'll probably wait till the driest part of the year to do that, July or August, when the water's at its lowest. So we'll have to pump it down and then replace the structure, and then it'll fill back up. So we've got that going. We've got our sewer system assessment program, which is the SLRAT that we use the acoustic testing throughout the town to make sure that we don't have any blockages in our pipes. They'll help me with that. The other thing, Jeff at Public Works starting to get their stormwater facilities categorized and starting to get an inventory of all that, the culverts, storm drain pipes and all that. I want to take that and I'm going to start working with Steve Labby from the Public Works. So I want to incorporate that into our GIS. So all of our utilities, right now we have the water company and the sewer is on there, but I want to get the stormwater on there as well. So basically any downtime that, the student would go with, or the candidate would go with Steve, and they would start, getting that data and loading it into right into our GIS. So, and that'll come back down the road because I think eventually we're gonna be dealing with stormwater treatment. It's only a matter of time, California and other places are doing it, kind of migrating through the country. So we might as well get a jump on it and know where everything is as part of that. So the GIS is kind of the first stage of that. We've got a number of other manholes that I want to raise to grade that are still buried under pavement, so we can do a proper assessment of the system. And then just any general assistance that we need with the department, garbage, mowing along or whatever, piping or whatever else we gotta do. So, I haven't done it in the last several years, but there's a lot going. I think I could use the help this year. So
You have someone in mind now, boy?
I don't know. I'm assuming we'll post this on Facebook. I guess that's how we've been.
You're gonna contact with UMO?
I tried to contact UMO intern program, and they never called me back. So my guess is, that intern program, I think is they get college credits for doing it, and I'm not sure if they don't, maybe you have to pay them, maybe you don't, or no, but this should be a paid position. I think that we would just, because they're gonna be getting their hand dirty out there with me raising manholes and with Jeff and everybody else, so.
Boyd is busy every summer, but this summer with this whole infrastructure project coming on and everything else, just more than one person can handle. And Boyd had brought this to me back a month and a half ago. We sat down and beat it up pretty good, and we've got a way to fund the position, and he needs the help, so.
Well, go ahead, Bob. No, I think it's a great idea. My only concern is what you really want is up here. What we're probably gonna get for applicants is probably not close to that. And do you have different goals based on the person you have, or you think you'll be able to train and supervise enough so that the person down here is gonna be able to get all those skills?
So the GIS part would be probably the thing that if I get the one down here versus up here, then I might have to scale back a little bit. As far as the eyes and ears, I'm hoping we get somebody with, it doesn't have to be an engineering student. It could be somebody that worked construction for a year and is familiar with sewer. Great, I'll put you right down there and you'll be camped out. So I think I've got enough different activities so that I can adjust what I'm dealing with and then put them in the proper role. So I think there's some flexibility there.
You're wondering, what are the time gonna be charged to? Can you charge them to this ARPA project?
Think so, yeah, and actually Al and I were talking about that, well, because the federal funding really doesn't have much for standards to go by, other than they said if you don't follow our standards, which rules what they are, then we might come back and get the money. So I think that would be a legitimate thing. We really could go out for bids to an inspector and we'd be paying, $40, $50 an hour.
Yeah.
To have somebody do the same thing. Well, I don't need that level. I just need somebody there that can take pictures, can document, make it work with me to make sure we got coverage. I just don't want to leave that unattended for the whole year.
Dave, so this position would not come out of our standing budget right now. even the one being voted on at the council. It's town meeting.
Well, so his budget is completely different. We haven't voted on that. If we, for some reason, find out that ARPA is not going to take care of this, which I don't think that's gonna be a problem whatsoever. We may have a different discussion when we do this budget.
With my sewer budget.
With yours, right?
You know, I've always had a concern about passing a budget. And either after it gets passed through the town meeting or before we start adding positions, and I don't feel good about that. We know it ahead of time, then let's do it ahead of time. If it's a separate budget, we have a funding source for it, go for it.
I'd make a motion, we go forward with this.
Motion's made, second by Don, all in favor?
Perfect. Thank you, Floyd.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Boyd right here, would we like to go ahead and look at the sewer commitment signing while he's right here still? In case there's any questions?
All right.
We'll take it out of order if that's all right.
What's that?
We're gonna take it out of order if that's all right with
It's
you.
fine. I didn't catch
Any
it.
questions on sewer commitment signing?
I'd make a motion, we sign the sewer commitment.
Second, all in favor? We do it. Thank you, Woody.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night. Sorry.
Thank you.
Next, number 6, to approve, a new person for the planning board.
Rick McKenzie has agreed to, sit on the planning board for a 3-year period, and so we're asking you to appoint him.
Motion made, second, all in favor? Vote on writing off property taxes over property owned in Oakland portfolio.
This is the parcel of land that we foreclosed on last fall, 77.9 acres of land off and it's landlocked off in Smithfield Road. The taxes of $27.50. We're asking you to write those taxes off so we can move forward with that property.
I'd make a motion, we write off those taxes.
Motion made, second by Dawn, all in favor? Next one's up, is looking at signing the Delta survey.
But we're gonna try to sell that.
As soon as it dries out, I can get up in there and gonna go in, but I don't know what I'm gonna get for it because it's swampland and it's completely surrounded by other properties. Whoever buys it's gonna have to negotiate some point of access for the property owner. Maybe one of the abutting property owners would like to have it, so we'll see where it goes.
Set you right up, the old piece of swampland.
Think of the wildlife.
Next, is considering signing the Delta contract.
So I've sent off several questions to Delta, they've responded, the last batch of questions came from Council Chair Mike Perkins. The response was that all of those answers were in that package that they sent us as far as the numbers go. At this point in time, I just don't think we have much of an option other than Delta. And I would recommend that you authorize me to sign this contract and we'll move forward from there.
Comments?
Rock in a hard place.
What's that? Nick?
If you're in a rock in a hard place, gotta do it.
I hate being held hostage. I seriously hate being held hostage, and I think that's exactly what they've done. The questions I asked is that how many responses did they come to Oakland? How much money did they generate for Oakland? And it's their core business plan is that because Waterville and Winslow have gone up, got their own rescue units. Now they're gonna charge everyone in the town of Oakland, wherever else they do, $15 per person. And I just think that's very, 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 very distasteful business. And I'll say it today, and if they was here, I was ready to grind them tonight. But I think we are, like Dave said, we're between a rock and a hard place. We're being held hostage. But I did like one thing on that contract. It said 1 year, and then next year we'll have to do it again. But they said they will determine the cost for next year. So here we go. I think that's something we have to look off in the future, probably. I say probably. Looking at seeing what we can do to supply our own units. They also said in here that they are not going to be held accountable if they cannot make it. And if you look at that in their contract, they said that they, if they can make it, then they have signed agreements with other agencies and they can make it. Well, some of these might be Unity Rescue. That's gonna be awesome. Unity all the way to here. it's gonna be an hour, but everyone has to pay their $15. That's how very disappointed I am with it. But that's where I stand.
So I move we authorize the town manager to sign the contract you don't.
Motion's been made. Second, all in favor? Yes, very begrudgingly, sorry, just, why not say it, right? Final item on the agenda tonight is approval of liquor, special amusement permit for Pressy House.
I'd make a motion, we approve that. Special amusement. permit.
Motion's been made, second, all in favor?
I have the license here for this summit.
Mr. Brewer, do you have anything?
I do not, actually I do.
Yes.
I was gonna go to Ella directly and get it back in time. Are we aware that the street light at Oak and High is messed up?
We've called them twice.
Okay.
And,
That's all I need.
yeah, we know it's going on blink at what,
6 o'clock, and then I went to a rescue call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and had to stop, wait for the light to change.
Jess
was a little
has been in contact with them, they're well aware of that.
Okay.
I don't know what the whole up is.
So what they got?
Mr. Knight, do you have anything tonight?
I do not.
Mr. Bowman?
I'm all for it.
Mr. Grover?
I make a motion we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Good night, folks, thanks for coming.